Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking developments in an international corruption case that investigators say could expose a vast money laundering pipeline stretching from Latin America to offshore havens across the globe. Here's what we know right now and why it matters. US federal authorities working alongside international partners have moved to seize a luxury superyacht in the Caribbean, an enormous, highly customized vessel investigators describe as a floating monument to stolen wealth. According to case files, the yacht is tied to the heir of a sanctioned regime and to networks suspected of hiding public money abroad. Witnesses in the area reported a rapid, coordinated operation, federal aircraft overhead maritime units closing in, and a swift takeover of the vessel before anyone on board could move assets or destroy evidence. Officials have not released every detail because the investigation is active, but they confirm the ship is now under federal control, being escorted to a secure port for forensic inspection. And what agents reportedly found inside is already fueling outrage. Investigators say the yacht's interior is packed with extreme displays of opulence, gold-plated fixtures, imported luxury materials, high-end surveillance systems, and private compartments designed to conceal valuables. In one area, federal agents reportedly opened a hidden safe, then began documenting stacks of currency gemstones and other high-value items scattered and stored throughout the vessel. Authorities stress this is not just about one ship. They believe the yacht is a physical node in a larger financial structure, shell companies, flags of convenience, and offshore ownership layers that can be used to evade sanctions and disguise the origin of funds. In plain English, a system built to make dirty money look clean and to keep it beyond the reach of ordinary citizens whose resources were allegedly taken. One investigator familiar with the case described the seizure this way: "Follow the luxury and you'll find the crime. That's the logic behind asset recovery operations worldwide, because the moment you cut access to hidden wealth, the machinery of corruption starts to stall." Tonight, we're going to do three things. First, we'll walk you through what this seizure signals and what it doesn't. Second, we'll explain how luxury assets like yachts become tools for laundering and sanctions evasion. And third, we'll map out what happens next, the legal process, the paper trail, and the likely next targets. Let's start with the obvious question: why a yacht? Because when money is illicit, when it is stolen, diverted, or earned through restricted channels, it has two problems. It's risky to hold, and it's hard to use openly. A superyacht solves both problems. It can function as a status symbol, yes, but it can also function as a bank vault, a secure meeting site, a mobile warehouse, and a private escape platform. And because yachts can be registered through layers of shell companies, leased through intermediaries, and flagged in jurisdictions with minimal transparency, the true owner can be buried beneath paperwork designed to confuse regulators and frustrate investigators. That's not speculation, that's a known pattern in financial crime. Now, sources close to the operation say the yacht includes a private helipad and specialized equipment to support rapid departure features consistent with high-security VIP movement. Agents also reportedly discovered advanced communications and surveillance hardware suggesting the vessel may have been used not only for parties and travel, but also for discreet meetings and sensitive transfers. And there's more. Documents recovered on board are now being examined for links to illicit extraction and black market commodity flows, especially precious metals. Investigators are reportedly reviewing maps, transaction ledgers, and contacts that could connect the yacht's financing to illegal mining networks and international facilitators. So, what exactly is being investigated here? In cases like this, authorities typically look at several overlapping tracks. Track 1 money laundering moving funds through complex transactions to disguise origin. Track 2 sanctions evasion using intermediaries and offshore structures to bypass restrictions. Track 3 proceeds of corruption assets purchased with public money or funds siphoned from state resources. And track 4 conspiracy networks, lawyers, brokers, accountants, shipping agents and fixers who make the system run. And that brings us to a crucial point. Law enforcement is not just chasing one wealthy individual. They're often chasing an entire enabling ecosystem. Because corruption at this scale is rarely a solo act. It's an industry. It requires people who can open accounts under nominee names, people who can incorporate companies in secrecy jurisdictions, people who can create lending arrangements that explain where the money came from, people who can produce invoices for fake services, and people who can move high-value goods like art, jewelry, metals and yachts across borders while keeping the true beneficiary obscured. This is why asset seizures are so significant. They don't just remove a toy from a corrupt elite. They generate evidence. A yacht is a crime scene that floats. Inside it are devices, logs, receipts, maintenance records, satellite communication, data crew, contracts, itinerary documents, port entries, maritime insurance paperwork, and financial traces that can lead directly to the financiers and facilitators behind the scenes. Let me give you an example of how something as ordinary as a refueling invoice can become a breakthrough. Fuel purchases create records, date, location, volume payment method, sometimes even the person who signed. Those records can be cross-checked against port entries and crew statements. If investigators find a mismatch like the yacht officially being somewhere, it wasn't that can point to hidden travel, clandestine meetings, or attempts to evade monitoring. Then there's docking. Docking fees permit security arrangements. Those require local contacts. Who paid? From which account? Through what intermediary? A single payment can open a chain of subpoenas. And then there's the crew. Crew members often come through agencies. Agencies get paid. Payments come from somewhere. And if the yacht's true owner is hidden, investigators can still find patterns, consistent funding sources, repeated intermediaries or management companies that appear across multiple suspect assets. This is why authorities call these seizures leveraged, because one seized asset can illuminate an entire network. Now, officials have not publicly named every country involved in the inquiry, but they are clear on the objective trace: the money frees it, seize it, where the law allows, and ultimately return recovered value through legal channels for public benefit, particularly in countries where citizens have endured economic collapse while elites lived in excess. That last part is important. Asset recovery is not simply punishment. It is in theory a form of repair, but it's complicated. Because even when assets are seized, turning them into funds that help real people requires court processes, jurisdictional coordination and safeguards to ensure money doesn't simply get stolen again in a new way. So how does the legal process actually work from here? Federal officials say the legal process is moving quickly, but it still follows a predictable sequence. Step 1. Securing and inventorying the asset. That means photographing and cataloguing everything: interior rooms, storage compartments, safes, electronics, art, jewelry, metals, cash, documents, and any hidden modifications. Think of it like processing a crime scene. Except the crime scene is 60 meters long, multi-deck, and loaded with custom features built specifically to conceal. Step 2. Digital forensics. Agents will extract data from onboard devices, computers, tablets, phones left behind, navigation systems, satellite communications, surveillance, DVRS, encrypted storage, and any removable media. Even if someone tried to wipe devices, forensic teams can sometimes recover fragments, timestamps, connections, and metadata that reconstruct activity. Step 3. The ownership chain. Forensic accountants and investigators will track the yacht's registration, flagging management company and financing structure. Was it purchased outright, leased, held under a trust? Did it have loans? And if so, who underwrote them, and why? Sometimes loans are used as laundering tools. A shell company borrows money from another shell company, and the debt creates a legal-looking explanation for movement of funds. Step 4. Forfeiture proceedings. This is where many cases intensify, because forfeiture forces parties to show lawful ownership. And if ownership is murky, if it's a maze of nominees and shell companies, then someone has to step forward and claim the asset. That step alone can expose relationships that were previously hidden. Now, some viewers ask, is this automatic? If they seized it, does that mean it's theirs? Not automatically. Seizure is the act of taking custody. Forfeiture is the legal determination that the government can keep it because it's tied to unlawful activity. That's a court process. If forfeiture is granted, the asset may be sold often at auction, and proceeds can be redirected through lawful processes tied to restitution, recovery, or reconstruction programs. But that brings us to another question people are asking tonight. Where is the heir now? Authorities have not confirmed the individual's location. Some reports suggest a possible escape moments before boarding, but officials have not validated that claim publicly. What they have confirmed is that international legal mechanisms are in motion, including asset tracking notices and cross-border cooperation to prevent flight and to close off safe harbors. In these situations, investigators typically focus on 3 near-term priorities. Priority 1, preventing asset movement, freezing accounts and blocking transfers. Priority 2, identifying facilitators because facilitators leave paperwork and have known patterns. Priority 3, locating the subject through travel records, communications patterns and financial activity. And here's something that often surprises people. Once a regime figure goes on the run, they frequently become easier to track, financially, not harder. Why? Because they still need services, security, transportation, safe lodging, communications, and legal help. Those services cost money. Money creates transactions. Transactions create risk. Now let's zoom out and talk about the how behind offshore laundering. The phrase offshore haven gets thrown around, but what does it mean in practice? It usually refers to jurisdictions that allow companies to be formed quickly with minimal disclosure, sometimes using nominee directors and shareholders. These jurisdictions are not inherently illegal. Offshore structures can be used for legitimate purposes, but they are frequently abused because they reduce transparency. A typical setup might look like this. A shell company in jurisdiction A owns the yacht. That shell company is owned by a trust in jurisdiction B. The trust lists a corporate trustee, not a person. The funding comes from an investment company in jurisdiction C. That investment company is funded by accounts controlled by intermediaries in jurisdiction D. Each layer adds distance between the asset and the true beneficiary. Each layer creates plausible deniability. And each layer forces investigators to request records from different legal systems, some cooperative, some slow, and some intentionally opaque. So how do investigators break that? They look for inconsistencies. If the owner is Company X, why does Person Y travel with the same security team across multiple assets? If the yacht is managed by Firm A, why do invoices get paid from Firm B in another country? If the subject claims they've never used the yacht, Why do phone location records and satellite logs show their device on board? If the yacht's itinerary is routine, why do transponders go dark near certain areas? If it's a business asset, why is it stocked like a private palace? These patterns aren't proof by themselves, but they guide subpoenas, warrants, and mutual legal assistance requests. And that brings us back to the reported discovery on board high-end surveillance systems and concealed compartments. Those are not necessarily illegal. Wealthy people do use security. But in financial crime cases, sophisticated onboard security can be a strong signal. It suggests the owner expected scrutiny or needed to protect sensitive materials. And when agents find hidden safes or compartments, the focus shifts from luxury to concealment. Now let's talk about the human impact, because behind every seized luxury asset is a public story. Authorities say the objective is to return recovered value for public benefit, particularly in countries where citizens have endured economic collapse, while elites lived in excess. That is the moral dimension of these cases. When a nation's wealth is diverted into private assets, the damage isn't abstract. It shows up in hospital shortages, failing schools, broken infrastructure, underpaid workers, and people forced to leave their homes to survive. A superyacht becomes a symbol not just of wealth, but of absence, the missing money that should have paid for functioning systems. And in many countries, that's the difference between stability and collapse. Now, because this is a developing case, officials are careful about what they confirm publicly. But investigators believe this yacht may be only the first visible piece. If this case continues on its current trajectory, it may not stop at one superyacht. Investigators believe there could be additional vessels, properties, and accounts linked to the same network spread across multiple jurisdictions. And if they can prove proceeds of corruption, sanctions, evasion, or money laundering, the next steps could include wider seizures, arrests, and negotiated recoveries. That phrase, negotiated recoveries, matters, because many high-value asset cases end not only with criminal prosecutions, but with settlements where intermediaries cooperate, assets are surrendered, and governments agree on distribution frameworks. That can happen when evidence is strong and parties want to reduce exposure. But none of that is guaranteed. These cases can also become long, politically fraught battles. Claimants emerge. Ownership disputes arise, offshore trustees contest. Lawyers argue that the asset belongs to a company, not an individual. Some jurisdictions move slowly, some refuse cooperation, and meanwhile the seized asset requires storage, maintenance, and security because a yacht deteriorates if it's not properly kept. Yes, ironically, seizing a superyacht also creates a bill. Docking crew maintenance, insurance repairs, and security can run into massive sums. Governments often hire asset management firms to preserve value pending forfeiture because the goal is to prevent the asset from becoming worthless before the court decides its fate. Now, for viewers asking, what happens next? Here's the likely sequence. First, the ship is secured and inventoried inch by inch. Second, the paper trail is reconstructed. Shell companies, nominee owners, offshore entities, and payment routes. Third, prosecutors seek court orders to formalize seizure and begin forfeiture proceedings. And finally, if forfeiture is granted, the asset may be sold, often at auction, so funds can be redirected through lawful processes tied to restitution, recovery, or reconstruction programs. But there are also two wild cards that could accelerate everything. Wildcard 1, a cooperating witness. If a crew member, a broker, a manager, or a financial intermediary decides to cooperate, they can explain the structure in plain terms and provide documents that cut through the offshore maze. Cooperation can turn a circumstantial pattern into a provable narrative. Wildcard 2 linked digital evidence. If the onboard devices contain messages, call logs, or documents that directly connect the asset to decision makers, it can dramatically strengthen forfeiture and criminal charges. Digital evidence often becomes the backbone of modern financial prosecutions. Now, some people at home might be wondering, why is the United States involved at all if this is tied to a foreign regime? There are several common reasons. One, US jurisdiction can be triggered if transactions clear through US banks use US dollars through correspondent accounts or involve US entities. Two, US sanctions and anti-money laundering laws can apply when sanctioned individuals or entities move assets internationally. Three, international coordination often routes through US agencies because of financial infrastructure and enforcement capacity. And four, if the yacht entered certain waters, docked in partner ports, or used services controlled by US companies, that creates additional legal pathways. In many high-profile asset cases, the enforcement puzzle is built from small jurisdictional hooks, each one seemingly minor, but together forming a basis for action. Now let's address a concern we hear whenever luxury assets are seized. Is this justice, or is this political theatre? Officials emphasize this is law enforcement, not spectacle. The goal is accountability, and to prove that even when money crosses oceans, it does not become untouchable. But to earn public trust, authorities have to do two things. They must prove the case in court, and they must show that recovered value is handled transparently. Otherwise, people lose faith and corruption simply changes shape. Tonight, we're also tracking how the international community responds. Some governments will see this as a triumph of justice, proof that sanctions and asset recovery can bite. Others will watch cautiously, concerned about precedent and sovereignty. And the sanctioned regime's allies may frame it as an attack. This is why these investigations often run parallel tracks, legal work in courts and messaging battles in public. But at the center remains the same question: was public wealth stolen and hidden in luxury assets? If prosecutors can prove that, then the ship becomes evidence, not just a headline. Now, tomorrow night, we'll break down the broader network. Investigators are mapping how illicit wealth is hidden across borders, how flags of convenience work in practice, and how asset hunters track luxury property used to store and move stolen fortunes. We'll also explain the most common laundering typologies connected to high-value, movable assets, yachts, jets, art, and precious metals, and why these categories matter for enforcement. And we will show you what to watch for as this case unfolds. Watch for court filings that identify the yacht's registered owner and management company. Watch for forfeiture notices that describe the alleged unlawful proceeds. Watch for additional freezes or seizures, especially real estate and bank accounts. And watch for any mention of cooperating witnesses, because that can shift the timeline dramatically. If you want the updates the moment they drop, subscribe and turn on notifications. Share this report so more people understand how global corruption is confronted, not with slogans, but with evidence, court orders, and real enforcement. I'm your American voice on this developing story. Good night, and may the rule of law keep moving forward.